Hello everyone, Eric Chappelle, Civil Community Evangelist for Autodesk, and with me today is Jeff Bartles, Infrastructure Technical Specialist, also for Autodesk. And Jeff is the star of the show today. He's going to be talking to you about using AutoCAD to model custom 3D content for use in InfraWorks 360. And I think Jeff may have the title, the winning longest title. We'll have to go back in the records and see if that's the case. Before we get to Jeff, though, I just want to welcome anyone who's maybe new to the Webcast series. We've actually been doing this for April will be 2 years. We've had this series running, and the good news is that it's been growing as it's been running. So that's good stuff. But we like to do this twice a month. Shoot for the first and third Wednesdays of the month. It's typically centered around the product team, but we do like to have guests come in from different parts of the company, and that's of course what we have today. Jeff had some really interesting stuff that he had been sharing on his civil immersion blog that we thought would be a great topic for this series. So we're hoping he can dig in and expand on that and show you guys some of the cool stuff he's doing with custom content for InfraWorks. But general goals for this series, we want to get you informed about our civil product features, and that includes Civil 3D or InfraWorks or really any of the products that can maybe tie in. We've talked about Revit, we've talked about Recap, whatever happens to kind of make sense with the workflow or the tasks that we're talking about. We want to give you a chance to ask questions and provide feedback, and I'll share some details on that in a minute or two. And we basically just want to bring you guys, the users of our software, closer with the makers here at Autodesk, and just give you some extra insight into what's going on. Our next webcast is going to be on March 1st. It's also a Wednesday, the first Wednesday in March, same time slot, 12 to 1 Eastern. On that day, our presenter will be Elliot Rosenfeld. He's from our Learning Experience team, and he's going to talk to you about creating custom materials in the InfraWorks interface. So again, expanding the capability of the product by generating your own custom content, materials in this case, for your specific needs. I've got a few polls that I want to throw out there, and if you guys don't mind, let me just get to those polls. The first one is, what is your current usage level with InfraWorks 360? If you wouldn't mind posting your vote up there, ranging from I don't even have it installed to I use it on almost every project, couldn't live without it. And it's been interesting to see the progression as we've given this poll, I think, in every single webcast for since 2 Aprils ago. We've definitely seen the responses shift downward, and today is no exception. We see a clear winner. 37% of you say I regularly use it on some projects. 21% I've installed it and played with it a few times. 23% I've dabbled in it on a few projects. So we're definitely seeing a shift to the regular use. Going to close that poll, and the next one is, what type of work do you do with InfraWorks 360? Now this is a multiple answer poll, so if you do more than one of these things, feel free to pick more than one. And if what you see isn't listed here, please type in what you do with it on the questions panel of your interface. And I'm actually going to pop that out, slide it over to where I can see it. So again, if you don't see what you do with it on the list, please let us know in the questions panel. Someone just typed in airports. And as far as the items that are listed, the winner right now with 74% is visualizing projects. Then second place tie with road design and site design. A very close third place, 55% GIS data compilation, and only 21% residential design. We've got some others popping in on the questions panel. Airfields, use it for getting terrain for Civil 3D, marketing, visualizing all data from GIS and remote sensing, solar aspect analysis. So lots of cool and different uses for the InfraWorks 360 product. I'm going to close that poll and hit you up with one more. So I'm assuming by the fact that you're attending this this webcast, many of you are already adopters of InfraWorks 360. But if you're one of a few, or maybe the only one in your company, what is your company's or your organization's main obstacle for full-on implementation of InfraWorks 360? Let us know what's holding you back. And again, if your answer isn't listed up there, please feel free to type it into the questions panel and we'll pick it up there. But choices include the cost of the software, lack in product functionality, unclear how to incorporate it into your workflow, Civil 3D already does what we need to do, so we don't really need InfraWorks, and training and implementation costs. So let us know if any of those are obstacles for you. And if you don't see your obstacle listed, please type it in the questions panel. And I'll let that poll up there for a few minutes. Right now, the winner of the items listed is unclear how to incorporate the product into the workflow. That's first place with 42%. 20% lacking product functionality. Basically tied for third place is cost of software, and actually tied, three-way tie for third place. Cost of software, Civil 3D does what we need it to do, and training and implementation costs. So I'm going to go ahead and close down that poll, and I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts on some of those questions. So a little bit about the InfraWorks 360 community. This is we're slowly transitioning this over to be the civil Autodesk civil engineering community. But the main hub for the InfraWorks 360 community is at the URL you see listed there, autodesk.com/InfraWorks360 community. From that page, you can have access to the discussion forum, idea station, infra tips, and lots of different resources that allow you to see what's going on in the civil engineering community as it relates to Autodesk, what kinds of questions people are asking about the products, maybe news about releases or updates. Infra tips is tips and tricks that relate to InfraWorks 360. We've got the gallery where people publish projects that they're working on, kind of a show and tell area. And we would love to see your projects up there. So if you've never been to the gallery, please visit it. It's amazing to see what some of your peers are out there doing. You can get some ideas about what's possible, what can be done with the software, and just see some really cool stuff out there that you probably would have never thought of. We've got some other things up there, namely webcast recording. So as I mentioned, this series has been going on for 2 years now almost, and we've recorded every single webcast and posted it up on the community page for you to view. So if you missed a past webcast, or you're just getting into this series, maybe this is your second or third one, you can go back and view any previous webcasts, and in a day or so you'll be able to view a recording of this one as well. So make sure to check back there. I don't believe Jeff's going to be talking about anything preview or labs or any of that, but just in case it comes up, we want you to know that any mention of preview features or labs or things that Autodesk is working on developing for the product, there's no guarantee that those things will actually be in the product until you see them there in a fully supported release, and we don't want you to make any purchasing decisions based on something that we're working on versus something that's fully supported and available in the software. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Jeff, and he's going to take you through modeling custom 3D content. Jeff, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, sir. Let me bring this up. There we go. Just want to check. Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you and see you.
All right, thank you. Welcome, my name's Jeff Bartles. I'm an infrastructure technical specialist here at Autodesk. Today we're going to be looking at a technique to create custom 3D content for use in InfraWorks. If you're someone who builds InfraWorks 360 models, the chances are you've gone into the city furniture area and grabbed some things like vehicles and trees and street signs and things like that. Sometimes, depending on the project that you're working on, you may not find things that are as specific as what you may need for your project. So what do you do then? Maybe you go out and start searching the internet for 3D content. That's always a possibility, but after spending, a couple hours out there, you may not find what you need. Where else can you turn? Well, if you have access to AutoCAD, you can model just about anything that you may need. If AutoCAD is something that you have available and you've you've got some AutoCAD skill set behind you. I know I'm an AutoCAD guy. That's where I tend to look when I need things. So today we're going to be walking through some of the AutoCAD functionality that we can leverage to build some of that content that we may need for InfraWorks. Just a quick agenda here. What we're going to be looking at, we'll be exploring some of the solid modeling and editing fundamentals. This isn't intended to be a full class in modeling. There is just a ton of things available for 3D modeling in AutoCAD. We're going to just lay some foundation today, show you how the tools work, just give you an idea, get you pointed in the right direction. We're also going to build some 3D models. I've got a custom menu board over to the right there on the PowerPoint slide. We're going to put that together today as part of a project. We'll create another object as well, depending on how time goes here. We're going to be looking at creating and applying custom materials. I've done a little bit of that with you before. We've done some another webinar on some of this stuff. We did a VR webinar where I created an object with some materials, so we'll be looking at that again. And then we'll look at how we can take the objects that we make in AutoCAD and import them into InfraWorks. And then along the way we'll be addressing questions. So that's it. Let me take and drop out of the PowerPoint here. And I'm going to start over here in InfraWorks.
Jeff, if I could just chime in, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I forgot to bring this slide up during my spiel. If anyone has any questions, please use the questions panel on your GoToWebinar interface. I'm going to be watching for questions, and if I see anything of interest or that I feel I could chime in and interrupt Jeff with, I will do so. So please don't hold back, ask lots of questions. It just makes the presentation that much better. Sorry, Jeff, as you were.
No problem. Thank you, sir. On my screen, I've got a fictitious fast food restaurant site plan that I put together for an Autodesk University session. And in creating this site, there was just a ton of content that I needed that was very specific to this particular fast food chain. Everything from these tables to the marquee sign up there, to the entrance signs. If I spin around behind the building here, I've got the menu boards. So these are the type of things that, I mean, you're just not going to find that in the out-of-the-box InfraWorks library. So I needed a way to create some of this stuff myself. And even this building, this building was created in AutoCAD as well. I just had a placeholder, the footprint for the building, and I just extruded that up and put that together using the same modeling functionality and tools that we'll be looking at here in a minute. So just a ton of custom stuff in here. In fact, these parking lot lights are custom as well. So the nice thing about this is you can generate this content, you can use it over and over again, you can start building libraries of your own stuff. So what I'd like to do, today we're going to be creating this marquee sign. We'll look at how that is done, and we'll also create the menu board that we just saw a second ago in the drive-through. So what I'm going to do is just change my proposal here to one that does not have those objects. That way when we come back to InfraWorks we can insert the ones that we create into this model. So I am going to jump out of InfraWorks at this time, and let's jump over here to AutoCAD. Now I'm using AutoCAD 2017. The majority of what we look at here is going to work. I mean, many of these tools have been around for years, so you can even use older versions of AutoCAD for this if you want. Likewise, this will also work in any AutoCAD vertical product, map, MEP, Civil 3D, anything that's built on AutoCAD is going to have this same functionality. So first thing that I'm going to do is when I launch AutoCAD, I'm going to make sure that I'm viewing the 3D modeling tools. And one way to do that, I'll just come down to the lower right corner here, and I'll ensure that I'm using the 3D modeling workspace. You can see there's a couple of them here. There's the basics that'll give you just the simplified version of the tools, but I'm going to choose 3D modeling. It gives me all the functionality. So we'll start, our goal in this session is to be looking at solid modeling tools. That's what we're going to take and focus on. So I'm going to hold my shift key and the mouse wheel, and let's orbit this. Just like doing a pan, but if I hold my Shift key down, I'll do an orbit. So this allows me to see my environment from kind of a three-dimensional perspective. And here on the Home tab, this is like our general purpose collection of 3D tools. I'm going to, in the modeling panel here, if I open this menu on the left, we have a collection of primitives. These are simple 3D shapes that we can create that could be the building block for building more complex shapes. Very easy to use. I'm going to launch the box command here. Creating a box is just like creating a rectangle. I can pick my first corner. If you look at the command line, you can see some of the options down there. Length is just like dimensions. I'm just going to pick for the other corner, and then I'll pull this up and give it a height. I've just created a three-dimensional solid object. This object reflects light, so let me come up to the Visual Style menu here, and I'm going to change this to Conceptual so we can see that. Once again, I'll hold the Shift key and the mouse wheel here to orbit. Let's create a couple other shapes. I'm going to open this up and I'll pick on cylinder. Creating a cylinder is just like creating a circle. I'll define the center point, then the radius or diameter, and then I'll pull up to create the height. We'll just grab another one here. Cone, just like making a circle, but if I pull that up, it creates a sharp point. So very easy to create these shapes. Now, once you create them, AutoCAD remembers how they were built, and it will give you grips. For instance, if I select my cylinder, it'll remember this grip at the top is used to adjust the height. I can use these grips at the quadrant to adjust the radius or diameter of the object. Let me press Escape. I'll select my little cube here, my box, and I can use these grips to drag this out and change the length, width, and height. Notice the extra dimensions that we're seeing there. I've got my dynamic input turned on. So as I grab this grip and pull, I can see one dimension is showing me how much I want to change the length. If I tap the tab key, I can go to the other dimension, which would give me the overall length. Let me make this maybe 12 long. Okay, so I can use dimensions on that as well. I can also, if I select this box, we'll go over to Properties. I can see length, width, and height here. Same dimensions that I used when or same attributes that I used when I built it. I can adjust these here. We can make this 12 by 12 by, let's make this like 1.5 tall. So very, very easy to customize these later. I can do that with the cylinder as well. Here you can see the radius and the height. I can also edit these shapes with my control key. You will find that the control key is very, very helpful with editing in 3D. If I hold my control key and I click in the middle of a face, it'll bring up this gizmo. Now there's multiple gizmos. We're just going to play with move here for a second. That's the move gizmo. In fact, this probably looks very similar to what we have in InfraWorks. If I click the Z axis, I can pull this face up or down. Let me press Escape. I'll hold my control key and I can click the front. I can then use the green axis here to pull this out. Now you don't have to press just faces. If I control click on an edge, I can use the move tool to adjust the location of the edge. And we don't have to do just edges. If I control click on a vertex, I can use this gizmo to affect the location of that vertex. So even though that's a solid object, using the grips, the gizmos, and the dimensions, I can quickly edit that to be something else if I need it. I am going to control click. I'm going to make my cylinder a little bit taller, and then let's move this. Let me turn off my ortho for a second. Let me just put that so that it shares the same area as this shape. In fact, I'm going to copy that as well. Let's copy one over here. So I've got two cylinders there that are intersecting that first shape that we made. Let me change my visual style here to X-ray. Just want to show you we can see how those intersect. In addition to the dimensional and the grip editing functionality, we also have some Boolean commands. Here on the solid editing panel, I've got an option called union. I can use this to fuse solids together. If I launch that, I can select my first shape and we'll union it to this first cylinder. And when I press enter, watch the area where those volumes intersect. You can see how that was consumed. This is now a single object. I can also do the reverse. If I come up under solid editing here, I can say subtract. I can select my first shape, press enter, and I can select the object I'd like to subtract. Let me press enter. So with subtract, this is how we can drill holes in our parts. Once again, I'm going to flip my visual style here back to conceptual so we can see that. Now, even after we drill the holes in it and make adjustments, we can still use that same control key to make adjustments. If I hold the control key and click, I can use the move gizmo here to move that hole. There are more than one gizmo. I mentioned that earlier. If you right-click on this gizmo, you'll find there's one for move, rotate, and scale. I'm going to choose scale. We can use this to change the size of that hole. Let me press escape. And if I wanted to get rid of the hole altogether, it's as easy as control-click to grab that face, and I'll press delete to take it out. Let's look at another just fundamental tool here. I'm going to draw a circle, and notice when I move my cursor over these faces, AutoCAD will adjust my UCS such that I'm drafting on that plane. Let me take and draw another circle. We'll put one on this face here. So very easy, I can take and align myself to those planes and create geometry. Once I've created shapes on those planes, I could use a command here called press pull. With press pull, if I put my cursor inside of a shape, I can pull that out or push it in. We'll pull this one out. Let me take and click this one here. I'll push it through, and once again, that's just another way that we can take and create a hole. The nice thing about press pull, it will work with 2D objects as well. For instance, I'm going to just create an arc here, and let me move. I'm horribly old-fashioned. I apologize. I'm resisting the urge to type my commands. So I just moved that over so you can see these intersect. I can use press pull, and I can use that in conjunction with a solid and a 2D object. So very quickly, just using some of the basic fundamentals, some of the fundamental tools here, we can create some complex geometry. So the extent of our discussion today is going to be on solid modeling. That being said, let me show you just a couple other things for exploration. When we're looking at the 3D tools, or with the 3D workspace here, you can see there's a solid tab, a surface tab, and a mesh tab. We have three different types of modeling that we can do. Solid is by far the most popular. Let me choose the surface tab for a second. We've had surfaces in AutoCAD now, at least going back into the 90s. Surfaces back in the day weren't the most intuitive or editable things in the world. I've just got some wireframe geometry here. I'm just using a command there called loft. I want to create a surface between these wireframe objects. Okay, surface, this is like, think sheet metal. Now it's not a solid object, now I'm creating the skin. So if I define my geometry via wireframe, I can use surfaces to cover that. Like I said, back in the day, these weren't the easiest to edit, but now, I mean, we could do this, but you may say, well, we can't fillet that. Well, now I can click those two edges, and I can set a radius, and I can apply that. I can click that radius after the fact and grab the grip. I can change that radius to something else. The nice thing, the surfaces of today will maintain a dynamic link to the geometry that created them. Back in the day, you couldn't punch a hole in one of these. Once again, I'm going to go back to my circle command here. Let's create a circle from the center of this object, and then I could come up and say trim. I could grab my surface, pick the object I'd like to trim it with, and then click the piece I'd like to remove. And all the while, the surface is dynamic to that shape. I can move it, I could scale it. Okay. Now you may be wondering, how long have we been able to do this? We've been able to do this since 2011. So this is just another vehicle to explore when it comes to 3D modeling in AutoCAD. Let's go one more step. I'm going to grab the Mesh tab. This is another whole feature or collection of tools that we can use to model. If I open this menu on the far left, you can see this contains primitives as well. I'm going to create a mesh box. Let me just go ahead and I'll pick 2 points, and I'll pull this up to designate a height. Now, when you first see this, it doesn't look much different than the box that we made before. Difference being, let me open my visual style here, and I'll change this to shaded with edges. There we go. We can see the edges. This is considered a mesh. This is how you can create organic shapes. Back in the day, AutoCAD was really good at creating shapes, but they had to be very geometric. I've just selected that, and now I'm just bumping up the smoothing here. You can see that's now a smooth shape. Now remember how we edited the solids. I held my control key. You can see if I hover, I can control click an edge or a face or a point. Let me right click on my gizmo and I'll flip this to move, and I'll click and I'll pull this up. I'll hold my control key and maybe I'll grab the let's orbit this up a little bit. I'll hold my control key and I'll grab a couple of faces, and I may be grabbing the ones on the bottom. Hold on. Let's see what we get. Could be just me. We can grab multiple. There we go. I got multiple there. So I can take and use this to pull it in. I can rotate. I can scale. So this is how we can create, you know, sculpted, more organic shapes. Just another tool. And then once we create these, I could select that and I could say, you know what? Hey, make that a solid. Now that it's a solid, it conforms to the same properties that the other solids do. So, you know, I could pull a cylinder up through that and I could subtract that volume out. So, okay, ton of tools that we have available. This is why I like to say that you can model just about anything that you want in AutoCAD. If you have access to AutoCAD, and AutoCAD's a tool that you're familiar with, these are great, great tools to explore. So, that being said, let me adjust my menu here. I'm going to close out of this drawing, and what I'd like to do is start by modeling the large, like, marquee sign that was out in front of the that restaurant in InfraWorks. So to go about doing that, one of the workflows I like to use is to start with an image. I'm just going to drag and drop this image here into AutoCAD, and I'll pull this out. So this image represents my inspiration for creating that sign. I like to consider this drive-by modeling. Okay, I know what I want. I don't want to make up all the dimensions myself, so I'll go out in the car and start taking some pictures of things that I think I can use with my cell phone. So now that I have that, this obviously isn't a perfectly orthographic photo, but this will be perfect for my needs. I've dragged this in. I'm just going to draw a line segment here. Let me lock my ortho, and I'll pull this over. And you know, you could take a measurement if you want to get out of the car. Like I said, I prefer to just drive by and take my pictures. Let's assume, or after looking at this, I figure that's about 16 feet wide. So I could use my scale command now, and I could select this geometry. I'd like to scale it from the end point of this line, and I'm going to use the reference option. I'll type R for that. What's my reference length? It's these two endpoints. How long do I want that to be? I'll type 16. So now I've just set that to be 16 feet wide, and now if I use the distance command, just going to type DI here for distance, I can start pulling some rough measurements from this. I can see that's, you know, approximately 9 feet tall. Let me tap my ortho here to turn this off. I can see the sign's about 19 feet tall. I can go through and start getting an idea of some of these shapes. So I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to get this down to the exact inch, but this gives me a way that I can quickly pull dimensions and generate a model that's going to look very similar to this in my InfraWorks environment. So let me select this and I'll delete. We'll remove that image. And then I'm going to hold my Shift key and the mouse wheel. We'll orbit this up, and we will construct that, that shape. I'm going to start by using some primitives. Let me open this menu on the left here, and I'm going to create a cylinder to start with. We'll create the poles first that hold the sign up. Let me just go ahead and pick my center point, and then I'm going to type D for diameter, and we'll give that a diameter of maybe 2.35 and maybe a height of 3.5. I'm going to say that this cylinder represents the concrete base that sign sits on. Now that I have some geometry here that reflects light, we'll set this to conceptual. Now we'll create the pole. I'm going to launch the cylinder command again. I'll create a cylinder from the top of this one with a diameter of 1.2, and then we'll say that sign 18.85. Now, am I making these numbers up? No, I got a piece of paper in front of me where I wrote these down from before. That way I'm certain that my sign looks okay and I don't have to go back and forth to my photo. So there's the height. I'd also like to create a little plate. There was a metal rectangular plate at the bottom where that pole met the concrete here. We'll use another primitive for that. I'll create a box. And let me lock my ortho here for a second. I'll pick my first point, and then we'll use the length option. And the length is going to be 1.5 by 1.5. It'll be a nice square, and I can pull this up 0.135. We'll give it a thickness. Now I'll put the plate on top. We'll use the move command for that. I'll grab that plate, and then I'm going to pick this up from my favorite object snap, mid between 2 points. I'd like to pick it up from the midpoint between these two opposite corners at the base. I'm now holding it from that location. I'll just take and place it to the top of this cylinder. So there's my first pole. I can now create the next pole. Now I could draw it from scratch, or I could just recycle this one. I'm going to launch my copy command, and I'll select that pole. Let's drag this over, and I estimate that's about 9.75 feet apart. Perfect. Since we're creating this sign now, another thing I'd like to do is place it so that it has an insertion point of 0, 0. This way when it goes into InfraWorks, I'm going to be holding it from a known location. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Let me move. I'll move these objects from my favorite object snap, the midpoint between the center of these two bottoms, and I'd like to place that to the pound sign or hashtag 0, 0. That'll ensure that it's placing it to a absolute coordinate. So now I know that as I build it, I've got a perfect object or insertion point here down at the base. Next thing I'd like to do is create the armature, if you will, that's going to hold that small sign down below. I'm going to use another primitive for that. Let's launch the cylinder command. We'll start at the top of this cylinder. This one's going to have a diameter of 0.3. Now, I don't want to set a height on this. If you look down at the command line, you can see there's an option here called axis endpoint. Using this, I can define the height by picking where I want the height to be. I'll grab the center of the top of this other pole. So I'd like 2 of these, so we will copy this one down. And when I copy it down, I've got my ortho locked. You can see that as I copy that, I just picked a point in space there, and you can see I can drag this in all 3 axis directions. In fact, you can even see that's -Z. Let me pull this down 2.25 feet apart. I want those. And then I'm just going to move the whole thing down. I'll just grab them both, and we will pull those down about 4 feet. So that's where that little sign is going to be. All right, now we can create the large top. Okay, that top marquee sign I've estimated is about 16 feet wide by 9.6 feet tall. I'm just going to generate a rectangle here. Let me launch my rectangle command. D for dimensions, 16 feet wide by 9.6 tall. So there's the overall shape. Now I'm drawing it laying down. There's no law that says I have to draw it at the top of the sign first. In fact, I like to treat my geometry like 2D and then convert it to 3D and then put it where I want it. Okay, just personal preference. So this is the overall shape. I'd like to round these corners with a fillet of 1.5. So let's launch the fillet command. We'll say radius 1.5. And then since this is a polyline, I'll use the polyline option and I'll click and apply that to all the sides. Let's offset this. I'm going to offset it about 0.075. I'll offset that object out. What I've done here is created the absolute outer edge of the sign, and then this edge represents where it's going to be recessed or indented where the logo is going to be placed. So there's the sign. Now I'd like it to be 2 feet thick. Here I'm not going to use a primitive, I'm going to use the extrude command. Whereas a primitive takes and builds the geometry from dimensions, I can also build solid models from geometry that I've drawn. So I can say extrude, and I can grab this closed shape and I can pull this down 2 feet. Perfect. And I'm going to set this to 2D wireframe here for a second. So here's my solid, and here's my polyline that's sitting on top of that solid. I'm going to use press pull and just push this down a little bit, but I want to get it on the other side as well. I want to have that indentation on the other side. So let's copy this shape from the end point here at the top to the end point at the bottom. I can now use press pull. You see I put my cursor right inside that shape, and I'm going to push that down. 0.05 gives me that nice recessed look. We'll see it a little better when I flip to a conceptual wireframe. Let me click in here and I'll push this up. 0.05. So you don't have to have the object reflecting light when you do the commands. Sometimes it's easier to do it with the wireframe turned on. So there we can see I've got the nice recessed area. So let's put this sign on top of the poles. I'm going to go ahead and select this, and I'm going to use a gizmo to stand it up. Since I'm using a visual style that reflects light, when I select this, I'll see the gizmo. Let me right-click and I'll choose Rotate. And then I can click the ribbon that represents the axis that I'd like to rotate this around. And you can see the axis pop up on the screen there. I'm going to use the red ribbon, and let me turn my ortho off for a second. When your ortho is off, this is real. I mean, I could type in an angle if I want. If my ortho's turned on, it's real easy. I just pull up and click. Now that's standing up. Now we'll put this in position. I'll say move. I'll move this. Now where do I want to pick it up from? Let me orbit this around. I'm going to use my favorite object snap mid between 2 points, and I'll grab the lower back end point, and then I'll grab the lower front opposite point. There we go. I'm now holding it from the very bottom center of that sign, and I'm going to place that to mid between 2 points, the center of these two tops. Fantastic. One more thing I have to create, just this smaller sign. Going to be a similar workflow. We'll use a rectangle. I'll just take and create that right here. D for dimensions, and this one's going to be 8.15, I estimated, by 4.4 feet. I can get rid of this stuff. I don't need that anymore. So there's my rectangle. I want to do that same recessed trick here, so we'll offset this. I'm going to offset it 0.05. There we go. We'll pull that out. This sign's going to be 1 foot thick. We'll go back to extrude. I'll hit that outer line and I'll pull down. One of the nice things about extrude, I can pull down and type a foot, or I can pull up and type a foot. It's going to extrude in the direction that I'm pulling. I'm going to go back to 2D wireframe here, and we'll do the same thing we did before. We'll copy this polyline from the top to the bottom so I can use it to do my indentations. We'll press pull. I'll just click inside that shape and I'll pull down 0.05. Still in the command, let me click inside this shape and I'll pull this up 0.05. Perfect. Once again, we'll go back to conceptual here. There we go. And now we'll put this in position. I'm going to stand it up just like before. I'll select it, hit my ribbon, lock my ortho, we'll stand that up. And then I'm going to move this object. Where do I want to pick it up from? I'm going to pick it up from the mid between 2 points, and I'll grab the back top corner here and the front bottom corner on the opposite side. I'm now holding that sign from the absolute center. Where am I going to place that? I'm going to place it to my favorite object snap mid between 2 points, and I'll grab the center at the end of this cylinder and the center at the end of this cylinder. Okay, so now that's in position. I can go ahead and select those rectangles and I can get rid of them. Let me do a quick save as here. I'll just call this big sign working for right now. So now that I have my geometry, I'm in a position where I can start applying materials. To apply materials, we'll go to the Visualize tab, and here on the Materials panel, I can open up the Materials browser. This is where we can access the library of all the materials that are available in AutoCAD. Now we can, if I expand the home here and go to Autodesk Library, I can start shopping through the various subfolders here, or I could just use the search string and look for what I want. I want just like black paint. I'm going to type black in my search string. And then plastic is an area I like to go. Smooth black is like my go-to black paint. Let me just drag and drop that into this upper area. This represents the materials that are in my drawing. Let's also go for a nice concrete material. That is going to be the material that represents the base of those poles. I'm going to take this one, flat gray 1. Let me just drag that into the drawing, and then I'll click the X to close the search, and then I can see the materials that are in my file. So let's flip the visual style here to realistic. That way when I assign my materials, I can see them. And we'll go ahead and we'll drag the concrete over, and we'll drop that on these 2 bottom cylinders. If I zoom in, you can see that concrete material. And then really the rest of this is all going to be black paint. So I'm going to hold my mouse button down and do one of the new loop selections here. I can select my objects ahead of time and then click the material. Unless I'm unlucky and didn't get these 2, let me select those and I'll click black. There we go. Now, I apologize, it's going to be a little bit hard to see. What I did here, since I've got that recessed face on both sides of these 2 signs, this is where I'm going to apply my photo material. So let me do a quick save here. To create a new material, I'm going to open up the menu at the very bottom of the library, and I'll choose New Generic Material. And then material name, I'm going to call this Big Sign. And then I can click the image box, and I'll choose a image that I made in Photoshop. This is I just called this large sign. Let me go ahead and click open. And then I can let me go ahead and click on that image panel there, and here's where I can size this. Now, if you remember, I've got it written down so I can remember. The inside dimensions of that sign are 16 feet by 9.6. So what I did in Photoshop was to find an image that was 16 inches by 9.6 inches. So it was proportionally the same size. That's the trick. You just want to define your materials the same size as what you're going to be applying them to. Let me turn off my proportional lock there, and for my sample size here, I'm going to type 16, and then for my height, I'm going to type 9.6. There we go. Let me go ahead and close this. And I'll close that, and then to apply this, I'll drag it over, and I'll hold my control key when I drop it, and that will apply it to the one face only. Now, sometimes it'll be off just a little bit. That's what the material mapping is for. If I open this up, you can see there's a couple options here. Planar is the one that we use most often. I'll say planar. I will control click that face, and then I'll just hit enter twice, and that'll make that material align perfectly to that shape. So now I can just rotate this around. I can control click to drop it, material mapping, control click, enter, enter. Fantastic. Let's do a quick save, and I am going to create another material. We'll do this one, we'll call it Grand Opening, and I'll grab my image for this. Same thing, made this one in Photoshop. The trick here is that this one needs to match the size of the face that it's being mapped to. That is 8.15 wide by 4.4 tall. Let me go ahead and close that. And this, I will control drop that over. We can do material mapping, control click, enter, enter, and I can spin this around. Whoops. We'll control drop this on the front. There we go. Material mapping. Enter, enter. Perfect. I can go ahead and close my materials now. So there is my part. It's now complete. Let me go ahead and save. And to use this in InfraWorks now, let me open my application menu, and I'll choose Export, and I'll choose FBX. So I've got the materials. I've got the insertion point. And you can see there's one I created earlier called Big Sign Working. I'm just going to call this Big Sign Final. When I export this to FBX, I'm going to be exporting these selected entities. I will select these. I want to export the objects and the materials, and I'd like the materials embedded. Let me go ahead and click OK. And then I am done. Let's jump out of AutoCAD, save changes, and then we'll fire InfraWorks back up and we'll place this one. And while my InfraWorks is coming up, I will ask Eric if he'll jump in for a second here and let me know if we have any questions to this point.
We had a couple. One was about the new geometric center object snap and how it works with the objects that you were creating. You have any insight into that?
Geometric center works fantastic with respect to grabbing the center of a closed polygon. In my case, like that one sign, I wanted to grab the center of the three-dimensional object. So I don't know if it would have been perfect for that, but yes, that is a more than possible. You can take and use that tool.
Okay. We had a question about glass materials. Do you have success with glass materials assigned in Civil 3D using this process?
I have applied glass to objects and then brought it over to InfraWorks to try and simulate things like water. I've not like created like windows with it to test and see just how clear and how how accurate that looks when it comes over on the InfraWorks side. But I know the transparency will work. That does work. Okay.
Yeah, and that pretty much covers several of the questions that were asked. So I'd say go for it.
Okay. So I'm back in my InfraWorks environment here to load that part that we just made. I'm just going to bring up Windows Explorer here, and I'll jump into my finished FBX folder. Here's the menu board new. I'll just go ahead and drag that FBX into the model. And then I'm going to say that this represents city furniture. If I click the 3D model tab here, whoops, wrong one. That's one that we were going to make in a little bit. Stand by. Let's try that again. Finished FBX. I want big sign final. That was the one that we just made. There we go. I'm going to make this city furniture. If we go to 3D model, there we go. We can see the model that we just made. To place this, I am going to go to the geolocation tab, and then I'll just choose interactive placing. This allows me to place it wherever I like. And you can see I'm holding it right from that center or lower 0, 0 coordinate. So I'll double click to place this in my model. I'll choose close and refresh. And then this acts just like any other city furniture object. So I can push this down a little bit. In this area, my ground has a bit of a slope in it. So I'll push that down so I have just a little bit of concrete here, and we can see it's projecting up a little bit there. If I want to get real picky here, maybe I might slide that so that it lines up with my curb and gutter, but you can see very, very quick, very easy way to generate that object and drop it into the model. Fantastic. Let me go ahead and close this. Let me jump back into AutoCAD momentarily. So the more you use these tools, you'll find the faster you can generate content. I've got another technique here for building a menu board, the one that we saw for the drive-through a little bit earlier. The technique that I'm using here is one where maybe I can't find a picture that I'd like to go with. Here I've just generated some geometry that represents what I want. I drew this on a layer called Sketch. I'm just going to hold my Shift key and we'll orbit this around. You can see that I've got a layer called Menu Board Current. Okay, even though this geometry here, we can see if I can get my thing to pop up. You'll have to trust me. That's on the Sketch Lines layer there. There we go. So if I start building this now, I'd like this to be 6 inches wide here, so I'll just pull down 0.5 with an extrusion. You can see that when it creates the solid, it puts the solid on the current layer, so we can use that to our advantage as well. Let me go to conceptual here. Down at the end, I've just got some simple line segments. These aren't joined together. I'm going to join these. I'll just use a crossing loop to select those. And then once they're joined into a polyline, I can come over to my properties palette and I can say, you know what, close that. That gives me a nice closed shape. I can then extrude this. We'll pull down. I want this to be 0.4. And then I'm going to use the trick with my locked ortho here to push this down, doing the math there. If I push this down 0.05, that base for my menu board should be centered nicely. Could have used my midpoint between 2 points as well to get that in there. Press pull. I'd like to do a little indentation for each of these. Let me click inside this shape and I'll pull it down 0.05. Notice I'm still in the command. If I click this one, if we look at the command line, you can see there's a multiple option that allows me to grab more than one if I want. Let me press enter and I'll pull these down 0.05. So those are all indented at this point. Now I'd like to create a little piece of trim that goes around the outside here that's going to be white. To do that, I'm going to leverage this polyline that I created before, but you can see, now that we have solids that are sharing edges with our geometry, I'm going to come down and turn on my selection cycling. This will make it easier to select those objects. Let me choose move, and I'll just click on this edge, and then I'll choose the object I want to move. I want to move this polyline from the top end point to the bottom, and then I want to offset this. Let's offset. What's my distance? I'm going to estimate here 0.035, and I'll click that edge. I want to offset my polyline in. Perfect. So the selection cycling, great tool when you're modeling, makes it easier to select your stuff. Let me select this solid. I'm going to hide it. I'm going to come down to my isolate objects here, and I'll say hide, and then I can get rid of these. I don't need those. So this represents my trim. Let's go ahead and extrude these. I'll extrude both shapes. We'll come up a height of 0.1. And I have two shapes here. I've got overlap. I've got this big one, and then I've got the smaller one inside. We'll subtract these out. Let's choose subtract. I'll subtract from the big one. I will subtract the little one. And here's where that selection cycling comes in handy as well. With the overlap, I can make sure that I'm picking the right one to subtract. Let me press enter. Let me go ahead and turn the selection cycling off, and I'm going to force this to be a different color here just so that it shows up a little bit different on screen. And then we can turn my isolation off here. We'll end objects isolation. So there you can see that little trim I want to have as just a white material. Finally, we'll copy. No sense drawing a bunch of these. I can just copy this from one common point to another. So there's my board. We can stand it up. Just go ahead and select it, and we'll use the gizmo. I'll right-click and rotate. We'll rotate around the red axis, and I'll go ahead and pull that up, and my object snap got in the way. Let's try that again. Hold on one second. I think I may have skewed it. Yeah, there we go. Let's select it again. Orbit. Another trick we can use, we can turn our object snap off, or if I hold the F3 key down, it will disable it while I pull that up so I don't screw up my drawing again. So I just pulled that up, and now we can say move. It's still selected. Let's move it from the mid between 2 points, and I'm going to grab these two corners, and we'll drop it to hashtag 0, 0 to put that at the origin, or my insertion point. And then finally, we'll go to Visualize here, Materials Browser, and you can see that I've already created a couple of materials ahead of time. I do want to grab some different colors here. Let me type red, and I'll come down to plastic. Now, I have to admit, when I started using the search field and I typed red, I started looking at these things saying, you know what, that's not red. That's not red either. It's the text string. Red happens to occur in the word textured. So, in case you've ever wondered about that, let me drag smooth red in here, and then we'll do white. I want a nice white paint. I'm going to go back down to my plastic category here. PVC white's my go-to, and then we'll do black, smooth black, and then I'll close the search field so that we can see the materials that are in this drawing. And then we'll drag the red onto the body. We'll set this to realistic so we can see it. There we go. We'll drag the black onto the base, and then I will select the trim, and we'll make that white. Let me do a quick save. I'll just put a number on this one. There we go. And the materials that I made here are just like the ones that I did earlier. Let me show you one other shortcut. You can see how this arc is a little facety. There is a system variable called facet res. Let me type facet res and I'll set that to 2. You can see by default it's 0.5. You can set that up to 10. Higher you set it, smoother your geometry will look. Higher you set it, the more it'll affect performance too. I find that 2 is a good 2 is a good general purpose setting. So same as before, I can control click to drop this over here, and then I can do my material mapping, enter, enter. So I tell you what, since we're running short here, basically I would take those 3 materials and drop those for my sign. As you saw, I've already created a menu board. So I'm going to drop out of this, and we will just pop back into InfraWorks, and we will place the that last board. So that particular object, I mean, that took 5 minutes to build. You know, maybe another 5 to generate the overall shape. So if you have access to AutoCAD, if AutoCAD is something that you're familiar with, something that you've spent some time with, it's a fantastic tool for generating content like this. Let me drop back here where I want to put that. And I'm going to go to Finished FBX. We'll go to Menu Board New. I'll just drag that in. And this is going to be City Furniture, Interactive Placing. I'll go ahead and double click to drop this here, and we'll refresh. Another trick when you're in AutoCAD and you're drawing your geometry, make sure and set your units. The units in both of these drawings are set to feet, because when you export that to FBX, InfraWorks is going to be looking at that units setting to know how to scale this when it gets into the InfraWorks environment. Had my units been set to inches, which is what the default is for the AutoCAD template, this would come in too small. Not a problem. You can always scale it here if you want to, but if you set your units to feet ahead of time, then you won't have to do that. So there we go. Quick summary. If you're someone that is looking for specific content, or you need specific content for an InfraWorks 360 model, you now have some more options. We don't have to always go out and try and find it online or spend a lot of time searching. You can now treat it as a DIY project and create it yourself. Hopefully, from what you've seen today, you believe that AutoCAD's easy to use, and I'm sure you'll agree it has a large collection of tools with a little bit of exploration. And just taking a look at some of the functionality that's there and spending some time with it, you can model just about anything that you may like, or anything that you may need for your project. So with that, I want to thank you for coming, and I'm going to hand things back over to Eric.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. Wow, that was an awesome job. I'm just going to share my screen really quickly and remind everyone about our next webcast that'll be coming up on Wednesday, March 1st. We do have a couple of minutes left. If you don't mind, Jeff, I'll throw out a couple more questions here.
Sure.
First of all, a lot of comments about what a great job you did, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Question about scaling the materials. I know you mentioned scaling the FBX, but is there any scaling needed for the materials themselves to go from inches to feet?
No. What I do is I define my materials. If I'm in AutoCAD and I've got a shape, let's say it's 4 feet by 4 feet, when I define my imagery that I'm going to put in there in Photoshop, we'll say I just make it 4 inches by 4 inches at like 200 dots per inch, 200, 250 dots per inch. So it's proportionally the same size. When you create the material, in the material you scale it so that it's the same size as the face that you're mapping it to. That's when it gets scaled. But once you export that as an FBX, it's locked to that object. So if I was to, had done the whole thing in inches and dropped it into InfraWorks, if I scale it up or down, the materials they'll go along as well.
Okay. Also a question, the site, surface, and materials were they modeled in InfraWorks or Civil 3D? So I'm assuming that means the site, the whole context.
Oh,
where was that modeling done?
Whole site was modeled in Civil 3D. I used feature lines to define my curb and gutter. and feature lines to define the sidewalks and all of the proposed brake lines, if you will. That's how I modeled the site, and then I created a surface out of that in Civil 3D, exported that surface via land XML, and then brought that into InfraWorks. And then I also took the shapes that I used in Civil 3D that represent the back curb and the islands and things like that, and I exported those as shape files that I could drop into InfraWorks as coverages to take and essentially paint materials over the top of that land XML surface. In fact, my next the next video I do for the Civil Immersion blog is going to be covering that very topic. I'll show you exactly how I did that.
Awesome. And we may hit you up for another webcast on that someday.
All right.
I see we're about out of time, so I am going to sign off. And thank you, Jeff, for another awesome presentation. I know I personally got a lot out of it because I didn't realize how easy the 3D tools had become in AutoCAD. So that was a really big learning experience for me. And I hope you all learned something today as well. I'm sure you did. Thanks again. Thanks for sharing some of your day with us, and have a great week, and look for us again in 2 weeks. Thanks.